In February 1959, 9 young hikers set out on a skiing expedition in the Ural Mountains of Russia. They never returned. When search teams arrived weeks later, their tent was found slashed open from the inside, their belongings left behind. The hikers' bodies were scattered across the snow, some barefoot, some with horrific injuries, and traces of radiation on their clothing. More than 60 years later, no one can explain what really happened on that frozen mountain, known to locals as the Mountain of the Dead. It all began in late January of 1959. A group of 10 experienced hikers from the Ural Polytechnic Institute in Sverdlovsk, now known as Yekaterinburg, planned a long-distance skiing and mountaineering trip across the Ural Mountains. The group was led by Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old engineering student known for his leadership and calm judgment in the harshest of conditions. The team consisted of 8 men and 2 women. They were strong, adventurous, and highly skilled, exactly the kind of people capable of such a challenging journey. But only 9 of them would make the trip. One hiker, Yuri Yudin, fell ill at the very start and returned home, unknowingly saving his life. The others carried on, never to return alive. On January 27, 1959, the group set off into the snow. Their goal was to reach Mount Otorten, a remote peak in the northern Urals. For days, they skied through thick forests and across frozen rivers, documenting their journey with diaries and photographs. The hikers were in good spirits. Their notes describe singing, laughter, and even playful jokes. The last photos show them smiling in the snow, completely unaware of the horror awaiting them. But then, the weather turned. On February 1st, strong snowstorms and freezing winds forced the group to change their route. Instead of moving toward Mount Otorten, they veered west, toward the barren slopes of a mountain known to the local Mansai people as Kholat Syakhl, which chillingly translates to Mountain of the Dead. That night, the hikers pitched their tent on the side of this mountain. It would be the last night of their lives. Back in Sverdlovsk, the hikers were expected to send a telegram once they returned. But days passed, and there was silence. Families grew worried, and on February 20th, a rescue mission was launched. At first, volunteers and fellow students searched. Soon, military helicopters, soldiers, and investigators joined in. What they found would defy explanation. On February 26, 1959, rescuers discovered the hikers' tent high on the slope of Kholat Syakhl. But the sight was strange. The tent was slashed open from the inside, as if someone had tried to escape in a hurry. Inside, all their belongings were left behind. Boots, warm clothing, even food. Everything was in place, except the hikers. Footprints in the snow, made by bare feet and socks, led away from the tent toward the forest below. The search party followed the tracks and soon discovered the first 2 bodies, lying beneath a tall cedar tree about 1.5 kilometers from the tent. They were Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonishenko. Both were barefoot, wearing only their underwear. Their hands were burned, and branches from the cedar were broken as if they had tried to climb desperately to escape something. Nearby, rescuers found the remains of a small fire, but the men had clearly frozen to death. 3 more bodies were found between the cedar and the tent: Igor Dyatlov, Zinaida Kolmogorova, and Rustem Slobodin. Their positions suggested they had been crawling or staggering back toward the tent before collapsing in the snow. At first, investigators assumed hypothermia had claimed their lives. But when the remaining 4 hikers were found months later, buried under the snow, the story grew darker. The last 4 bodies, Lyudmila Dubinina, Alexander Kolevatov, Nikolai Thibault-Brignol, and Semyon Zolotaryov, were found in a ravine deeper in the forest, and their injuries were shocking. Nikolai's skull was fractured, as if struck by a massive force. Semyon had multiple broken ribs. Lyudmila had her eyes missing, her tongue torn out, and strange internal injuries with no external wounds. Some of the clothing carried high levels of radioactive contamination. Doctors were baffled. These were not typical injuries from an avalanche. They resembled the damage from a powerful explosion or something unknown. The official Soviet investigation concluded that the hikers died due to a compelling natural force. But what was that force? Over the decades, countless theories have emerged. Avalanche theory. Some suggest a small avalanche struck the tent, forcing them to flee in panic, but the slope was not steep enough, and there was no evidence of an avalanche. Katabatic winds. A sudden blast of hurricane-like winds could have caused chaos, disorientation, and panic. Military tests. Some believe the hikers stumbled into secret Soviet weapons experiments. Parachute mines or radiation tests could explain the injuries and radioactive clothing. UFO encounter. Strange glowing orbs were reported in the sky around the same time. Could the hikers have encountered something extraterrestrial? Infrasound theory. Some scientists suggest that strong winds created infrasound waves that triggered fear, panic, and hallucinations, causing the hikers to run blindly into the night. The Soviet authorities quickly closed the case, sealing files and restricting access for years. Officially, the deaths were declared a tragic accident, but locals, families, and researchers believe the truth was buried. For decades, the Dyatlov Pass incident has haunted Russia and the world. Books, films, and documentaries continue to explore it, but no definitive answer has been found. In 2019, Russian authorities reopened the investigation, and in 2020 they concluded the cause was most likely an avalanche. But many experts and independent researchers reject this explanation, pointing to the strange injuries and missing evidence. Story number 2, the Enfield Poltergeist. In 1977, in a quiet neighborhood of Enfield, North London, a family claimed their home had become the site of one of the most terrifying hauntings in modern history. Furniture moved on its own. Strange knocking sounds echoed through the walls, and most disturbingly, a young girl was said to have levitated in front of witnesses. This became known as the Enfield Poltergeist case, one of the most famous and debated paranormal events in history. The story begins with the Hodgson family. Peggy Hodgson, a single mother of 4 children, Margaret 13, Janet 11, Johnny 10, and Billy 7, lived in a modest council house at 284 Green Street, Enfield. They were ordinary people. Life was not easy, but it was normal. Until one night in August 1977, when everything changed. It began with small disturbances. Peggy's daughters complained that their beds were shaking at night. Then came the knocking sounds, faint at first, then louder, echoing through the walls and ceiling. At first, Peggy thought it was just the children's imagination, but soon she witnessed it herself. Chairs slid across the floor, dressers toppled over, toys were thrown across rooms with invisible force. One evening, Peggy saw something that chilled her to the bone. Her daughter Janet was lifted off the ground by an unseen force and slammed onto her bed. The terrified mother called the police. When officers arrived, they too witnessed strange things. One constable reported a chair moving across the room by itself, as if pushed by invisible hands. But there was nothing the police could do. This was not a crime, it was something beyond their control. The story spread quickly. Newspapers picked it up, and soon the case caught the attention of the Society for Psychical Research. 2 investigators, Maurice Gross and Guy Lyon Playfair, moved into the house to study the strange events. Over the following months, they documented shocking phenomena. Furniture shifted without warning. Knocking sounds followed them from room to room. Objects like marbles and toys were thrown by unseen forces. Janet, the 11-year-old, became the center of activity. She spoke in a deep, unnatural voice, levitated above her bed, and was even thrown across the room in front of witnesses. Photographs were taken of Janet mid-air. Tape recorders captured the growling voice that seemed to come from within her. The voice identified itself as Bill Wilkins, a man who, according to records, had indeed died in the house years earlier. Doctors examined Janet and were baffled. They concluded that her vocal cords could not sustain such a voice for long without damage, yet she could speak in it for hours. Skeptics, however, were not convinced. Some journalists accused the children of faking the haunting for attention. In certain moments, Janet and her siblings admitted to staging small tricks, such as bending spoons or hiding objects. But investigators argued that while some incidents may have been fabricated, many others were impossible to explain. Heavy furniture moved when no one was near. Objects flew across rooms in full view of witnesses. Even renowned paranormal investigators, Ed and Lorraine Warren, visited the house, declaring it a true case of demonic possession. For nearly 2 years, the Hodgson family endured the disturbances. By 1979, the activity faded and the house grew quiet once again. The Enfield poltergeist remains one of the most documented paranormal cases in history. Hundreds of hours of recordings, witness testimonies, and photographs exist. Some believe it was one of the most convincing hauntings ever recorded. Others remain certain it was the work of imaginative children. Whatever the truth, the events at 284 Green Street continue to haunt the world of paranormal research. Story number 3, the Amityville Horror House. In November 1974, a shocking crime shook the quiet community of Amityville, New York. Inside a large Dutch colonial house at 112 Ocean Avenue, a 23-year-old man named Ronald DeFeo Jr. took a rifle and murdered his entire family in their sleep. His parents, 2 brothers and 2 sisters, were all killed in cold blood. The crime horrified the nation, but what followed would make the house infamous for generations. Just over a year later, in December 1975, the house was purchased by George and Kathy Lutz. They moved in with their 3 children, hoping to start a new life together. The home was spacious and beautiful, and the price was surprisingly low because of the murders that had taken place there. The Lutz family believed they could move past the tragedy, but from the moment they arrived, strange things began to happen. On the very first day, a Catholic priest was called to bless the home. As he sprinkled holy water in one of the rooms, he reportedly heard a deep, angry voice command him, "Get out." The priest left quickly, shaken, and later told the Lutz family never to sleep in that room. Over the next days, the house seemed to come alive with disturbances. Swarms of flies suddenly appeared in the middle of winter, buzzing around the house in impossible numbers. Cold spots emerged in rooms where no draft could be found. Strange green slime oozed from walls and keyholes. The family began hearing voices, footsteps, and loud banging noises at night. Doors slammed shut on their own. Windows opened by themselves. Crucifixes hung on walls were found turned upside down. George Lutz, once a calm and rational man, became increasingly irritable and distant, waking at 3:15 a.m. every night, the exact time of the DeFeo murders. Kathy Lutz began having terrifying dreams about the murders and claimed to see ghostly figures in the house. One night she said she was physically levitated off her bed. Their daughter, Missy, told her parents she had made a new friend, an invisible pig-like creature with glowing red eyes, which she called Jody. The disturbances grew violent. Objects moved through the air. Strange odors filled the rooms. George claimed to hear a demonic chorus echoing through the house. At times he felt as if he were being possessed, drawn to anger and violence. The family's ordeal lasted only 28 days. In January 1976, unable to take any more, the Lutz family fled the house in the middle of the night, leaving behind their belongings and never returning. Their story became a sensation. Paranormal investigators, including Ed and Lorraine Warren, visited the house and declared it the site of powerful demonic activity. Photographs taken inside the supposedly empty house showed what appeared to be ghostly figures, including the image of a small boy with glowing eyes. The Amityville case quickly grew into one of the most famous haunting stories in America. Books were written, and Hollywood films turned the Lutz family's ordeal into the legendary tale known as the Amityville Horror. Skeptics, however, argued that the haunting was a hoax, possibly invented for publicity or profit. Some claimed inconsistencies in the Lutz family story. Others pointed out that subsequent owners of the house reported no paranormal activity. Yet believers insist that something dark still lingers at 112 Ocean Avenue, where 6 innocent lives were brutally taken and a family fled in terror. Whether hoax or haunting, the Amityville Horror remains one of the most chilling and debated cases in paranormal history.